Welcome everybody to RICO 12. My name is Lisa S. and I have the disease of alcoholism. Begin with a moment's silence for the still suffering addict inside and outside these Zoom rooms, followed by the we version of the set aside prayer. Dear God, please set aside anything we think we know about ourselves, about our disease, about the big book, the 12 steps, the program, the fellowship, the people in the fellowship, and all spiritual terms, especially you, God, so that we may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help us to see the truth. We surrender this next hour to you. Your will, not ours, be done. Amen. So RICO 12 is an organization with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addiction of all kinds and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We come together from all places, faiths and backgrounds to gain tools and hope from others. Speakers from our past meetings have represented many fellowships, addictions and afflictions. And we look forward to continuing to add to the diversity of speakers and backgrounds. And I hope you'll reach out if you think your experience, strength and hope will benefit this special community. We do have new times now of this Afro-Euro meeting. I hope that you can draw strength and hope from these podcasts that we host every Friday at 12 p.m. UK time and 2 p.m. South African time and 7 a.m. in Eastern American time. Today's speaker will be Peter, who will be speaking around 30 minutes. We'll get him to do his share, followed by some Q&A afterwards. Firstly, the RICO 12 family of recovery resources continues to grow and has more and more resources for the addict and the loved ones of those addicted. We have all the recorded RICO 12 shares and a couple of other exciting projects, one of which is the Big Book Roundtable discussion, where we've got Nikki M, David G and Justin B, who go through the first 164 pages of the Big Book line by line. Great listen. That is the Big Book Roundtable, what you can find on all the info, what I'll put in the chat, and it is on the RICO 12 WhatsApp group. Tradition 7, RICO 12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our Step 12 in this manner. We gratefully accept one-time contributions through PayPal, Venmo, and Wise, which will also be put through the links in the chat. We also offer a monthly subscription program called RICO 12 Spearheads. To join in and help support these cool projects, please consider donating at www.rico12.com/support, or you can click on the link in the chat. So we look forward each meeting to growing deeper in effectiveness and understanding as we learn from and with our special speakers. So today we're very blessed to learn and grow with Peter, who has come in at the last minute. So I'm very grateful for you, Peter, this morning. And Peter's from Ireland. So over to you, my love.
Thanks, Lisa. And thanks for hosting the meeting. And good to see people. So I'll say a little bit about myself, where I've come from, and where I'm at now, really. So experience, strength, and hope. From a very early age, I think because of the environment that I was brought up in, I think it was really difficult. A difficult environment. There was lots of chaos, and we didn't have much money. My dad was an alcoholic. My mum was kind of codependent in a way. There was a lot of kids. There was 8 of us, 8 children, and it was difficult. those early years. And, we didn't really talk about feelings or whatever. There was lots of stress around. And so I got into fantasy, I think, to help me cope with it. So fantasy was one of my first kind of addictions, in a sense. I fantasize about the family down the road, feeling and believing that they had a better life, a better environment. Their parents were better. Was fantasize about all sorts of things. It was more love than every other family. Less stress and what have you. So that was my first kind of addiction, I would say. Where I'd spend a lot of time obsessing and fantasizing. And then when I got a little bit older, I got into gambling. And I spent a lot of time gambling. And addictively, I would lose everything that I made. And then after that, I got into alcohol and then drugs. And I took everything I could really to cope with my depression, I think, and my anxiety. To be fair, I didn't really have a clue what was going on in my head, really. I was very confused. And I put on an act. I learned to put on an act. Acting as if I was confident, as if I knew what I was doing. But behind it all, I think there was lots of confusion, lots of fear, anxiety, low self-esteem. And like I said, an inability really to express what I was feeling because I didn't know what I felt. So it was difficult for me to have relationships. It was difficult for me to socialize. And also I started getting into like I said, sex addiction, fantasy. If I was with somebody, I would often think the grass is greener on the other side. If I got any notice from anybody else, I would find that attractive and appealing. So I was kind of desperately in need, I think, for to be valued and recognized, and desperate need for connection, really, with people. But because I struggled with expressing my feelings, because I've struggled with knowing what I wanted, it would have been difficult for me. It would have been difficult for me to get my needs met. I think, difficult for me to connect with somebody and to be realistic about what a relationship is about. I think I put unreasonable demands on any partner that I had. I'd expect them to understand me. I'd expect them to be empathic. I'd expect them to read my mind, and to know what's going on with me, even though I couldn't tell them. I would expect them to be good at everything. So I had these kind of fantasies, ideals, a lot of idealization. Because I found it difficult to live in reality. I found it difficult to be who I was. I found it difficult to accept life for what it is. And so, you know, I find it difficult. I had lots of relationships. In fact, I was nearly always in a relationship, but I found them difficult, you know. And I had this fear, I think, of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of being on my own. And so I would try and control people in that sense. But, you know, and then I remember I was in a relationship one time, well, for a good while, for about 7 years. And when she threatened to leave me, I just kind of fell apart, really. I think I felt very anxious about being on my own, and anxious, I think, maybe about feeling lonely, or whether I'd be able to cope or not. So, but anyway, you know, to cut the story short, I came into recovery in 1992, which is 34 years ago, from alcohol and drug addiction and gambling. When I put that stuff down, that I think my kind of sex addiction kind of excelled in a sense. So I would get into more fantasy. I would try and get my needs met through sex and through relationships. But, you know, because I had an addictive nature, I could never get enough. And what I did get never did fill my needs, and or fulfill my needs, and never did fill those gaps, really. Of you know, the gaps would have been feelings of uselessness and emptiness. Like I said, low self-esteem and anxiety. It's really difficult to have a relationship. You know, when difficult for me when I had all that stuff going on, and when I was in such fantasy land. So, you know, so I started going to the fellowships. You know, I went to one fellowship at one time it was called Sexaholics Anonymous. And the bottom line there was no sex with yourself or anybody else outside of marriage. And that was difficult to maintain that bottom line, you know. So then eventually I went to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, SLAA, and that was a better program for me in a sense, and you know, because you could make your own bottom line. It wasn't so rigid and what have you. And working the steps in that fellowship worked really well for a while, and having a sponsor. But eventually, I kind of I moved away from it, and from that particular fellowship, and since then I got married and had children, and you know, changed career and everything, you know, and seemed to function really well for a long time. But over the last few years, I think my sex addiction has kind of surfaced again, and it's been making my life difficult, I think. And you know, I don't think I was really growing at the pace that I could have. And I often felt maybe a bit isolated about it, a bit maybe lonely, a bit anxious about it, hopeless, and what have you. So it's just recently that I've kind of come back to the fellowship, to FLA, and I've got about 5 days abstinent from the bottom line behavior, which I'm really pleased about. And actually, I'm meeting up with a sponsor today to go through the steps with me, 12 steps, and you know, he's got to go through those 12 steps with me. I'm going to start using my sponsor a bit more. I'm going to start coming to more meetings and try and work the steps on a better level. So I know I feel better when I do that, and I'm already feeling better that I've got 24 days of abstinence from a bottom line, and the reason I came onto this meeting today is that I want to try and get as many meetings in as I can and talk to people like yourselves and get the support and what have you, and the encouragement to work the steps and move forward. So I think I'll leave it there. Really, I don't want to kind of ramble, and I hope that what I said might help somebody, but it's helped me. And thanks again for asking me to share. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much, Peter. So it's interesting. You really opened my eyes there because, like you said, 34 years, wow, of being putting the drugs and the gambling and the alcohol. And I've heard it so many times. And then the lust and the sex and the fantasizing creeps in. And there's so many different programs, using, but it's like you said, just doing the steps again. There's one, one program which is the 12 steps and working that, isn't it? That void you were saying you were trying to fill, and it all, but we stopped that one, and then we try something else. Yeah. The addictive compulsion, searching for something to fill that void. So yeah, and 34 years. What brought you to the rooms in the first place, Peter? Why did you suddenly realize that you needed help?
Well, for me, what happened was I discovered that the alcohol and drugs weren't working anymore. And, that was a daunting prospect, it just didn't seem to work anymore. And I think I reached an emotional, mental kind of rock bottom with it all. And so I knew that if I kept going the way I did, I possibly wouldn't have lived for much longer. So for some reason, like I said, the alcohol and drugs weren't working anymore. So I needed something. I needed something else, and gladly I found a 12-step program, and it helped. So.
Got questions about addiction, recovery, or just life in general? Let's noodle it out together. Grab your big book, a pen, a highlighter, and a notepad, and join Nikki M and me, Justin B, on Rico 12 Noodle It Out with Nikki M. Each episode, we take real-life questions, ours, yours, and those from the recovery community, and dig deep into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to find real, practical solutions. So, if you're ready to do the work and apply the solution, tune in to Noodle It Out with Nikki M, streaming now on your favorite podcast platform.
Yeah, Peter, when you did it back then, when you started the 12-step program, did you going through the steps, what did find, in step 2, coming to believe in a power greater than yourself? Did you struggle with that? What did that look like for you?
Well, to be fair, I was brought up Catholic, but I moved away from that. And whatever, I didn't, I wasn't committed and what have you. So I had some kind of perception of a God, all right, but I think working the steps and that, I developed what I felt a healthier perception of a higher power in a way, and somehow I knew that the steps and the meetings and the people in the meetings were a higher power than I was, that's where I could get my support and help so
Yeah.
that gave me a sense of security, really, the steps and the fellowship and the meetings and the program. So.
Yeah, that like you said, I was brought up in a not really strict religion, but I think the revelation for me when I come into the 12 step and started going through the book is that I was always brainwashed or programmed to think that God was out there, and I went to the pearly gates if I was a good girl, and starting to realize through this program, that God is deep down inside. And it was such a revelation, and that brings me on to, so with step 11 and saying we sort through prayer and meditation. What does your prayer and meditation look like on every day, Peter?
Well, not good, to be honest with you. And I think what I like about coming to the meetings is it reinforces the importance of praying and using a higher power. So this morning I might have said a quick prayer before I got out of bed, but not enough really. I don't hand my will over as often as I could do. I try and control things myself. I don't meditate as much as I could do. So I don't. Unfortunately, there's plenty of room for improvement there. But if I don't pray, I usually suffer the consequences. If I don't practice step 3 and step 11 and what have you, I tend to suffer. So. And coming to the meetings and wanting to do the steps again, and I'm hoping to up my game in that sense,
Yeah, and that's like you just said, it's practicing all the steps on a daily basis. Like you said, rinse and repeat every day. Throughout my day, I'm incorporating, because I love when it says the main purpose of the book, so the 12 step, is to connect to a higher power, because my life run on self-will is not a success. We've all got proof of that, haven't we? And so for me, like you just said, it's remembering all this stuff that, the prayer and meditation and watching myself and handing my will over. I've got a great, I'm great at forgetting, Peter, are you? So I have to repeat it every day so that I don't forget, because I soon drift off and think that I'm off on my own little wheel and I'm doing everything I want to do and start manipulating. And I guess that's what it comes back to with all the different, you said where you've gone from drugs and alcohol and then put that down, and then the sex fantasy comes in. I love what it says, if I get rid of my old beliefs, and when I'm connected to that power and I want to live in God's will, then these sort of outside material things, what are instant gratification, they do dissolve by when I'm more connected with God. And yeah, it's interesting. What about, you said you've just started meetings, Peter. What does your step 12 look like? Do you work with others or do some service?
No, I don't. I do on a professional basis. I get paid for it, but I don't do any voluntary 12-step stuff other than come to meetings. I think, you know, but I don't. And again, that's another area that I could improve on, you know, and that's the beauty, I think, of coming to the meetings to get reminded of this stuff and how important it is, you know.
Yeah,
Practice
definitely.
principles, all right, you know.
Yeah. Before recently, you said it's sort of escalated with your sex addiction. When you come in 34 years ago, were you practicing the steps then, Peter, or has it just faded out over time of being sober and clean?
Yeah, just started getting into the steps, you know, when I came into the fellowship, you know, and that, you know, I got a sponsor straight away and what have you, and, you know, and tried to incorporate the steps, you know, and it really helped to shape my whole life, really, and my character, you know, so particularly step 4 and what have you, and 4 to 9. But absolutely, it's easy to, isn't it? Easy to lose grasp of the steps and what have you, and you know, I kind of try and do a lot of stuff on my own, you know, without trusting God and without, you know. So, but like I said, that's the beauty of coming to the meetings, to get you know, to
get refreshed and get back. That's That, do you know what come to my head then? If we rest up on our laurels, we're heading for trouble.
Yeah.
And like you said, you've been feeling it. You can feel the pain of this emerging again with the sex addiction, and it is so subtle, isn't it? And like you say, if we just get complacent and start dropping some of these directions, we've got all these clear-cut directions in the big book, you know. If we stop practicing them on a daily basis, you can see that there is trouble ahead. And as you beautifully explained that, Peter. So has anyone else got any questions?
Hi, my name is Julia. I'm an addict. I'm actually a sex and love addict.
Hi, Julia.
Hi. I just wanted to ask if, like, the fellowship because you've been in it for such a long time, have you seen it change? Were the meetings different when you started than that they are now? And also be interested in the difference maybe between the first time you started on sex addiction and then sex and love addiction. As I just go to any big book meetings, but I went to a lot of SLA meetings, and I would like to have your experience in that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think one of the changes I have noticed in Alcoholics Anonymous is that there's more women now than you know, than when I first started. And same with all the fellowships, I think, you know. But with regards to the program and what have you, it's the same. It's the same program, and Alcoholics Anonymous is still thriving. But also, I think sex and love addicts anonymous meetings are expanding, I think, and really growing, because this is really important stuff, isn't it? Relationships and reality, and you know, obviously there's a danger of people being you know, addicted to fantasy and living in reality, you know. But I'm not sure if that's answered your question, Julia. But
oh, thank you. I really caught on you talking about fantasizing because that is, I think now being in SLA for a while, that's one of my main problems that keeps sticking. Like the acting out behaviors might have dropped, but the fantasy is quite hard to get rid of. So, and I think it's nice that that is seen and talked about in addiction spaces because it might not be what comes to your mind when you think about addiction. So thank you for that, first of all. So I would like to know a little bit more about how do you experience fantasizing, like what are you fantasizing about and why you would call it addiction?
Yeah, really good question. For me, fantasy is like a drug, a strong drug, and it's difficult to let go of. I developed a really good art of flirtation, and I'm addicted to romance, and like I said, lots of fantasy. Because I found reality difficult, and one of the main objectives in recovery in any program is to learn to move from fantasy to reality. So it's about learning to live in reality and have realistic expectations of my partner, for example, and of life, and so that's the challenge, I think. Learning to live in reality, because some of the stuff that the behavior that comes with the fantasizing can be very destructive and damaging to me as well. Can play havoc with my mental health and a sense of myself. So
yeah, it's interesting, really interesting, because it is like escapism, isn't it? Almost. You're trying to escape, we're blotting out our heads with either alcohol, drugs, sex, some food, whatever it is. It's getting to escape our feelings. We don't like reality, I guess. It's very interesting. And if there's no more questions, I will thank you again, Peter. That was really eye-opening. It really was. And so interesting. And it was a great meeting for all the addicts and their loved ones. And this will, benefit many. There's many who will benefit from listening to your honest share, Peter. If we didn't get to any questions, or anyone listening to this podcast right now, and you have, please consider joining our WhatsApp community by sending an email to rico12pod@gmail.com. And you can join in our community and ask those questions. If you'd like to be a future speaker on Rico 12 Afro-Euro, please send an email to rico12pod@gmail.com. If you've not yet rated and reviewed the podcast in Apple Podcasts, please go do so now. It's a great way to work step 12 in sharing this message with others. And I invite you all back next week with another great sharer. One last bit of service. Peter, would you like to lead us out on a prayer of your choice?
Yeah. Good. If we could maybe close the meeting with maybe a step 3 prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. God, I offer myself to you now. Build with me and do with me as you will. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do your will. Amen. I think that's the step 3 prayer.
Beautiful. So there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Stick and stay, guys. And when you do, come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.